Hello, hello. Welcome. Another day drinking with David. We've got a very special show. I am extremely lucky and honored to have my friends from Scotland and Los Angeles with me today. The brand ambassador, Neil Strachan from the Balvenie Distillery. It is a very special, beautiful place, and we're going to invite a bunch of friends from Scotland to come talk about the distillery and show us the incredible things that are happening there. So I'd love to welcome Neil in to say hi and tell us a little bit about what he's doing. There he is. Hey, Neil.
Hey, David, how are you doing?
Thanks so much for being here. What a pleasure this is to have you and for organizing all this wonderful stuff. And how are you? It's late where we are.
Yeah, at least this is good for me. This is a good time to be drinking instead of the planned morning session that we were having.
I know. I'm glad we switched from the 8 a.m. making Scotland work late to the late, and they work early. So it really worked out for me. Plus, you don't have the little one running around here. But yeah, it's so tell us a little bit about what you do and what we're going to do today. And I'm very, very excited for, not only the whiskeys, which you've given me, but also a tour of your very beautiful facilities there. It's a place I love and know and revere, I would say. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think as a whiskey fan myself, and been to lots of different distilleries, the Balvenie Distillery is exceptionally special, and it's special because we have people making our whiskey. In every single stage, you will see people making it, and certainly some of our neighbors around Speyside. Walking into their distillery, you don't see anyone other than someone using a computer. So we really feel the difference between good and great whiskey is from the human eye and hand. And a lot about what we do at the distillery is really sharing some of the fantastic decades and decades of service that some of our craftsmen, the makers of our whiskey, have. And what's nice about technology is I've got a little bit of help as well tonight. So I'm the West Coast ambassador for the Balvenie. But I also have, as a treat for everyone, the global ambassador, Gemma, from Speyside. If you can join us, Gemma.
Hi, both.
Hello.
David, nice to join you from Scotland here.
Welcome. Thank you for coming to visit with us and talk about the beautiful distillery.
I had a nice laugh when you were saying you got us up early here in Scotland. We joined at 7:30 a.m. this morning.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I mean,
it's okay, but the sun's coming up now, so
look at that.
It was dark when we started chatting. We've got some sunlight.
That's shocking. I really do thank you for being up early, and I know it's it's not easy to put these things together. So it's truly an honor to have you with us. And tell us a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'm super excited to hear about it.
So I am the global ambassador for Balvenie. I'm based here in Speyside, not too far from the distillery. And today we're going to take you through a little bit of the history, production of the distillery. We're going to taste a couple of our whiskies as well. So we have 3 special drams to talk through together. And then finally, we're going to have a little peek inside our warehouse and have a look at our ton 1509. Because right now for us at Balvenie, it's sort of all about ton. It's really ton season for us. So we'll come on to that a little bit later. But like Neil said, with Balvenie, we're immensely proud of our team who make our whiskey. So really, it's all about our craftsmen and the people there. So we'll have a good chat about them and introduce you to some of the great characters at the distillery too.
Beautiful. Well, the Balvenie Distillery really stands out in Scotland, not only because of the
you've been to visit, David.
I have, yeah.
Times.
I have a couple of times been, and there's only just a handful doing it the way you're doing it, and it shows in the quality of the whiskey. And so I'm really excited to show my customers and anybody who's watching, how important that difference is. Can you can we
let's take a little look at the distillery. I have some images
It's
here, so we
obviously
can give everyone a bit of a sense of place with Balvenie here. This is it. So this is the main distillery building. You're looking down at sunrise towards the Balvenie Maltings.
gorgeous.
So here's our floor maltings. You can see the pagoda.
And when was it founded, the distillery?
The distillery was actually founded in 1892.
Okay.
And actually, back in the beginning, it looked very different. It looked a little bit like this, David.
Wow. It's like a manor.
So yeah, this building is called New Balvenie Castle. And William Grant, when he bought the land, so William Grant's our founder. William Grant, very humble beginnings. He was born and bred in Dufton, born in 1839, went on to found the Glenfiddich Distillery, our sister distillery, which is just about 500 yards up the road from Balvenie. 5 years later, he found himself in the position to set up a second distillery, which was Balvenie. Incredibly entrepreneurial and ambitious man. When he bought the land next to Glenfiddich, there was a farm there called Balvenie Mains, and on that farm stood this grand manor house, which is called New Balvenie Castle. And this building was actually built in 1724 by the Duke of Fife. William Grant turned this into his working floor malting. So you can see this chute on the far right-hand side, going from the top floor down to the ground floor. Actually, this top floor was our malt loft where we stored the barley. The bottom floor is where we malted that barley. So yeah, very interesting and unusual distillery building. Now the distillery looks really quite different. As I said, you saw this image here of our floor maltings, our working floor maltings. The long building you see in front of you is actually made from the same stones. So in 1929, the family decided to knock that New Balvenie Castle down and build this custom-built floor maltings that we have today. But it uses the same stones that came from the old Grand Manor House.
So cool.
Beautiful view of the pagoda. And this is you looking right down into the middle of the courtyard at Balvenie. You're right in the heart of the distillery now. In Speyside, we're surrounded by rolling hills and trees all around. You can see at the moment at the distillery, we're in our autumn garb, and it looks absolutely incredible. Lovely golden colors and greens, all and reds all around the distillery. That castle stood right in the middle of the courtyard. So where you see the pagoda on the left-hand side, and you see the distillery production buildings on the right-hand side, right in the middle is where that grand manor house used to stand, which is now what you're looking at is our warehouse 24, which we'll take a look inside a little bit later on.
Very cool.
But where some of our oldest and most precious casks are the foundations of that building obviously date back to 1724 in that grand manor house.
Well, Balvenie's in the town of Dufftown, and which is an although often sort of overlooked whiskey village or town. I mean, it's not a very large place. But
population of about 1,500 in Dufton.
Yeah.
And to put that into context, we have around 200 people who work on site across our distilleries in the town. So we also have 1 million casks maturing on site as well, David. So for a town of 1,500 people, they have a serious amount of whiskey surrounding them. I remember being in Kentucky once, going around Jim Beam, and the guide said, "Hey, guess what, guys? There is 1 barrel of bourbon in Kentucky for every single Kentuckian." Kentuckian, is that right?
Yeah.
And then I'm there like, you know, in Scotland we have 4 for every man, woman, and child in Scotland.
Yeah. It's not.
And saying that, is it time for a whiskey?
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Neil knows where I'm going.
Yeah.
Not for me. It's 7:30 a.m., 8 a.m. now. I'm gonna look at the whiskey and watch you guys drink.
That's fine.
Well, I was going to say the first whiskey that we're starting with, I used to describe as like my breakfast whiskey. So, you know, I don't think it's a bad time for you. There we go. Look at that.
We won't judge you.
Bottle.
Well, and of course, the 12 it's an iconic product. You know, the double wood has been so many people's gateway into the category, to really bring single malt around the world, really, and it's one you can count on seeing, but I'm always happy when you're like out and you're like, oh, thank God they've got the 12 here at Balvenie. We'll just have that, and that'll do. So tell us about this whiskey, Neil.
What you just said there is exactly how I certainly feel about it way before starting this role. And yeah, I totally agree. It's like that safe bottle you see on any back bar whenever you're thinking, oh, what am I wanting? I'm wanting with, and then nothing inspires you, and you just go for that every time because you know it's so safe. So I think often it's quite overlooked, because it's our entry level product, but this whiskey's been around since our centenary, since 1993, and it's stood the test of time. And if we consider what was being produced by, say, our neighbors, our competitors in 1993, it's all changed massively, but this one stood the test of time. So it's a whiskey that's aged in ex-bourbon casks for 12 years, and then we finish off this liquid for no more than 9 months in Spanish oak Oloroso sherry casks. And that finishing process was something that David Stewart pioneered, something that whiskey geeks out there know Balvenie for starting. And it's really like foundations of our style, this whiskey. So what I love about it is this whiskey every time gives you more and more. With me drinking it probably 3-4 times a week, in tastings, it's amazing how much interesting flavors kind of come across. And certainly Balvenie's house style oozes on this. There's a lot of honey and vanilla, but on the nose, I always, and when I'm making cocktails with this, I'm linking in some of the like orange notes, and I kind of describe those orange notes as like candied orange peel, which I don't know if I've ever had candied orange
like
peel.
Marmalade.
To smell quite like the sweet orangey notes that we have here. But then good whiskey is for drinking, so slange it.
Slange.
Cheers.
Cheers. Gorgeous. Yeah, it's interesting, and we haven't really touched on this, and I'm sure we will later. We don't think of this as a peated whiskey, and it's not peaty at all, but there is this underlying sort of roasty maltiness that even with the finishing still, and I think that's part of why the balance works. You have all this high quality wood here, but then the spirit itself has so much character that you're not overpowered or it's well balanced in that respect, because it's not smoky per se, but there is this touch of roasty, not quite coffee, just this undertone of roasted malts, but it's a powerful flavor that really stands up to the sherry.
And what's interesting on what you're saying there, it's quite similar to like the notes that we get from the spirit. So when the liquid comes off of our beautiful stills, it's sweet and malty. That's our description. So for you to be getting that character coming through is great,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I think it's something that I miss in a lot of modern single malt, because that I feel like there's a tendency to want to be so consistent and clean and that's great. Like, I get why they do that, but there's something about the hand malting, having that little essence of peat, and just the inconsistency that creates that I think really makes a difference. What percentage of the malt is hand malted here?
Around 10%, David.
And you still get it. It's incredible.
So we're fortunate. Actually, right now at the distillery, we're producing a special batch of malt that has been grown in the home farm. So we're lucky to have not just the floor maltings on site, but barley fields surrounding the distillery as well, which if you visited us a couple of months ago, they would have been beautiful and golden. Now the barley has been harvested. That is sitting up in our malt loft, laying dormant, waiting for us to malt it and make whiskey from it. But we every year, our farmers, so we're farmed by the Wiseman family, father and son duo, who have farmed the land for generations. They'll sow the barley seeds kind of springtime, and it's, I think, something lovely at the distillery is to be really connected to the seasons like this and watch that grow over summer. The fields become lush and green, and then beautiful and golden in autumn time. Harvest happens, and then that barley's handed over to our maltmen, who are then in charge of it, and will eventually malt it and send it on to become Balvenie. But it's every single mash of Balvenie has a percentage of the home malt integrated into it. So although it would be, I mean, we're running through around 50 tons of barley a day at the distillery. So that would be absolutely impossible. Our malt loft holds 400 tons maximum capacity. And in fact, when there is 400 tons up there, you can almost see, because the building is, our Maltings building was built in 1929, the beams kind of curving in the middle with the weight of the barley when you have a full malt loft there.
That's not at all nerve-wracking. But
that's what 400 tons is, 6 days production for us. Oh, eight days production. Can't do maths. It's too early in the morning.
So you have to, and there's no way to ever do that all on site.
No, if we did do that, unfortunately, the amount of Balvenie that we could send out there into the world would be so limited. Yeah. But we do have a couple of expressions, okay. So I said we're kind of letting you into one of our distillery secrets here. I said to you that we are in the middle of producing some home malt right now. So actually we've cleared a week schedule at the distillery and dedicated one whole week to passing just home malt grown from a single field on the distillery, the Berrylees field, through the distillery. So we'll fill that into cask. Who knows what that will become one day. This is something we have been doing for a number of years. We also have an expression that we've just launched as part of our stories range called the Edge of Burnhead Wood, which is...
Oh, I haven't heard of this.
This whiskey right here. I don't think you've not launched it yet in the US, have you?
No, we are launching at the start of this year. Start of next year.
Start of 2021. So you're getting a little preview of what's to come. But this is a 19-year-old Balvenie that is, most excitingly for us, produced from 100% homegrown, home malted barley. And then as an additional layer to that, we used heather, a batch of spring heather in the kiln to dry that malt in the pagoda. So
that's pretty...
We only filled 50 casks back in 2000 when we produced this. So it really is a little piece of Balvenie history.
Wow. Is that something that would have been done traditionally, or is this innovation? Is this totally innovative? I mean, would you burn heather in the...
Heather? So yeah, peat is essentially heather. So obviously, well, yeah, you're familiar with peat and what peat is, but peat is like thousands of years of decomposing organic materials in the ground. So heather roots forming a big part of what peat is. So you can prove that heather is something traditional within the whiskey making process.
Nuts. I love that. That's such a fun idea. Where is the peat for Balvenie sourced from?
New Pits Sligo. So if you try something like the Week of Peat, this one here, lucky I've got these to hand behind me.
Yeah, this
is our only expression of Balvenie that you'll find out there that's really quite peated. It's again a limited edition we produce once a year, and the peat for this comes from a place called New Pits Sligo, which is about an hour's drive from the distillery. So it's Speyside peat we use as opposed to Islay peat, which really is very different.
Cool.
Should we talk a little bit about our maltings?
Yeah, let's get in about them. Now we've touched on the farm. We should go on to the next side of the process and talk about that fine room, the distillery gym.
I'm not going to stop that 12-year tasting. You know, when you do a show at midnight, nobody cares if you drink. And I do a show at 10 in the morning. It's weird when you show up at your kids' daycare with
I've got a full working day ahead of me with a couple more live streams, so I've got my cup of tea.
I like how she's pretending that it's a cup of tea in there. If I know her, it's a dram in there. It's an excuse. I'd be doing the same.
All right, sorry, Neil.
All right, you two. enjoy your dram for a second. I'm going to show you a little video from our maltings to get us into frame of mind here. Ready?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Gosh, almost making me emotional, that, you know, not being home in Scotland for so long and missing that. Gosh.
Well, tell us.
Yeah, so we're really fortunate that we're one of very few floor maltings still around in the industry, and to my knowledge, it's the only one that works all year round on the mainland of Scotland. And I fondly remember doing my induction, you know, getting to work every part of the distillery. And before working the floor maltings, everyone at the distillery was kind of smiling, going, "Aye, you work the floor maltings yet? You work the distillery gym?" And they had this kind of cheeky smile about them. And I was like, well, what's going to happen to me in this place? Is this like some kind of like onboarding kind of thing that happens in here? Well, and basically, it's just really hard work physically.
Yeah.
And when you know, when I was, and one person in particular that who's kind of made the maltings his own, a gentleman who's just kind of retired, is Robbie Gormley. And I was looking at Robbie thinking, oh, he's an old man. How hard can this be? I'll tell you something, the sweat that was pouring off of me after half an hour of just moving moist barley around, hats off to them, because it just, what a job they do.
This is Robbie here.
The strongest guys in the world. And not only that, it's like you have to do it a certain way. I mean, maybe it still works, but like it's not only hard, it's also kind of precise in the weirdest way. Like watching them do it, you're like, that's not just simple like throwing bricks over your shoulder. But I mean, it's that, and then getting them, you know, to fall into a hole. Sorry, let's look at Robbie. He's great.
There you go.
And the kiln as well.
And yeah, so basically, like for everyone out there back home, the maltings process, or our floor maltings, is how we're going to access the sugars and enzymes inside the grain for us to make the whiskey. So what we're doing is we're tricking it into germination. In the back of the floor maltings, we have these steeps. They're like, gosh, needing some whiskey for my throat. And we soak that barley up to about 45% moisture content. It's going to kickstart the germination. And after we soak it for 2 days, we'll empty the water out and spread the barley along that floor. And then, formerly Robbie, now retired, but the team will turn that floor by hand, making sure that the barley laying on the floor is at a balanced temperature. It's oxygenating it, so the germination process can happen quite balanced. And then over anything from, 5 to 8 days, maybe a little bit longer in winter, that grain starts to change inside. And over time, the germination process is going on, and we get that barley to a stage where we would call it green malt. And so the grain itself is just trying to grow, but we want the sugars inside. So we're going to stop that, and we're going to kill the growth of the germination, and we're going to use heat to do so. And behind Robbie there is our furnace that we burn anthracite in, which is smokeless coal, to dry the barley in. But right next door to that furnace, you see there's also a peat furnace. And I think one of the biggest problems I've had since moving to America is battling people going, "Oh, it's not smoky. It's not peated, Balvenie. I thought all Scotches were peated." And Balvenie generally isn't, but having those two kilns allows us to do a peated malt if we wanted to. And yeah, what a great spot in the distillery, and certainly with anyone like yourself, David, as well, it's fantastic to see a real working floor maltings.
And even the regular malt has a little bit of peat, right? I mean, if I remember correctly, there's what it was like 10 minutes of peat or something, a touch of it. I don't remember.
As we'd say back home, a wee bit more than that. But about two and a half hours. But it really, it certainly doesn't, I don't think, come through in the flavor profile that much. But yeah, well remembered. It was
percent of, or what's the length of the total roasting process or drying process, really? I wonder.
Or 48 hours in total.
48. Oh, so it's a tiny little percentage of it. That's it's interesting that they've kept that step. And in modern single malt, I mean, most malt isn't even kiln dried this way any longer, correct? I mean, it's just it's electricity derived hot air in a giant canister, right? Is that I think that correct?
It's when you get to an industrial maltsters and you see what they're doing, it's very, very different. When they're soaking the grain, they're pumping oxygen through it. There's these big washing machine style kind of tumblers that are rolling the grain around with light and heat to help that germination. Completely different. And when you actually kind of work the four maltings, you see why so much of the industry have moved away from it, because it's so hard physically on people's bodies.
Yeah.
Well,
and just to do it scale is just outrageous. It's impossible. Wow. Cool.
And I think anyone that's been to Speyside, one of the biggest the scariest aspects of going to Scotland is not not the Highland cows or anything. It's a truck drivers with the grain in the back that are racing around Speyside. You don't see anywhere that a truck drives as fast as a whiskey lorry. God.
I've been on that road before.
Yeah.
It's like every road in Scotland. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in the littlest, dinky road and on the west coast, and out of nowhere a 18-wheeler with a 10,000 liters of whiskey is barreling toward you at full speed. You're like, this is a one-lane road. What?
We don't have the highways that you have, so they're little windy roads that nuts. We have.
I've cut it close a couple times, but it's good to be extra careful in Scotland on those roads. So after sorry, go ahead.
Just to add a little bit about the maltings and the people there, and we've spent all this time with Robbie on the screen. The maltings, it's really where everything starts. And Robbie, he's been an incredible mentor over the years. So you saw in that video that we showed, you had Robbie and Craig working together on the floor. Craig is one of Robbie's apprentices. But walking around the distillery across Balvenie and up at Glenfiddich as well, you'll meet quite a few of our production team and our craftsmen who actually they started their career working in the maltings with Robbie, and Robbie trained them up before they went on to one of the next stages. So Robbie is really well loved on site. And Neil mentioned he's retired now. Robbie retired a couple of years ago, and he didn't want to have a fuss. This photo was taken just this year, actually, in February. I did some recording with Robbie on site, so he's still very much around. It's still a part of the Balvenie Distillery, even after having spent 47 years working with us. But Robbie, when they had his retirement party, he didn't want to fuss. He didn't want to have to make a speech. So he decided to compose a little poem instead. And this poem is in honor of our distillery ghost called the Green Lady. Now, you've been to Balvenie, David. You've been into the floor maltings. if you work a night shift there, you're working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. And, you know, there's ghostly happenings at night. That Robbie spent years working on the turning the floors downstairs, listening to the Green Lady's shuffling feet above him upstairs. So his last few nights working, he composed this poem about the Green Lady. I can show it to you guys now if you want to hear it. You can hear Robbie recite the poem himself.
Oh yeah.
Some of the languages and his accent could be a bit challenging for you to understand, but
don't you dare translate it.
All right, here goes.
I was working away with the radio on, singing along to a wheel Kent song, throwing down my very last step when I heard the sound of shuffling feet. Well, when I looked up, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I'm telling you now that I'm nae leeing. There, going ben the loft, was the Green Lady, and on her shoulder the elusive malt monkey. Well, she could see she gave me quite a scare, as she slowly came forward and sat down in the stair, and the monkey fickered her boot and played with her hair. Then she started to speak, with her voice so low, I had to go and turn off the radio. She said, "Oh, Robbie, we heard it was time for you to go, so we thought we'd just come down to say cheerio. You see, we've watched you all these years, throwing down steeps and pulling out flares, teaching others how to use a shield, for a while there even was a coin as wheel. We've heard you tell stories about us too, to loads of visitors and even to film crew. Ah well, it's no time for us to disappear, but we'll be back another year." And as they walked off down the loft, the monkey looked back for one last peek, and I carried on throwing down the steep. But it's a night that lie was bide with me, my very last night shift at the Balvenie.
Wow, that is just gorgeous. He's quite the wordsmith, I have to say.
He really is. He's not just written poems, but Robbie's actually written songs as well. He wrote a song called the Cleric Song, and it goes to the tune of "Hank Snow, It Don't Hurt Anymore." And this is Robbie singing about the stills running dry in Dufton, and there's no cleric no more. And he said that as they're turning the floor, you know, they used to sing it at the top of their voice.
That's awesome. Wow, very cool. So, but he's still like showing up at the distillery and just being like, "Hey, what's up? Let's have a chat," or what? That's so cool.
Yeah, I think honestly that's something special about Balvenie is the team. So we also have another couple of legendary craftsmen, Dennis McBain, Brian Webster. Dennis was our coppersmith. He joined us back in 1958, and is still, many people kind of have met Dennis and spent time with Dennis because he still comes and hosts visitors and looks after guests on site. He's really got a lot of incredible stories as well. He's a special character. But that's something special about Balvenie. Like, people just don't want to leave.
Yeah. Well, it kind of gets back to like, you know, don't really realize it, but you know, William Grant's one of the few family-owned companies in the Scotch industry, and it's, you know, you can feel it when you're there. Like, people want to be part of this, and it's a really cool thing. I mean, it makes a difference. You know, we feel it, you know, because we have these personal relationships. Of course, we have a relationship with everybody, but it's pretty incredible. I really do, you know, feel that.
For sure, this team have a lot of passion, a lot of love, and a lot of passion for what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at what we do at the Balvenie and being so proud of like our heritage and our craftsmen at the distillery, having these experienced master craftsmen still coming down and chatting or training before they retire the next generation of whiskey makers, and you see the progression of individuals, and it's so nice, you know, to have these people around. Certainly for Gemma and I to learn about, like, one of my favorite things is spending time with Dennis McBain, because the stories of what happened in the whiskey industry in like the 60s, it's completely changed days and days that I can only imagine. So yeah, it's so great for us having them around.
Yeah,
very cool.
Now, is it time for another whiskey?
Neil, you read my mind.
Yeah. So We'll move on to a whiskey called the Balvenie Single Barrel 15. I've got a mark on my bottle, sadly, there. And this whiskey is one of only 800 bottles of this whiskey ever made. I had to give you a small sample of this one, so we had the same bottles. And
Cheers.
this is Balvenie aged in sherry butts, and a lot of people really out there that know the Balvenie really spend. When we think of the Balvenie, a lot of the spirits aged in ex-bourbon casks, and it's quite unusual to see Balvenie straight 100% sherried. So they're all a little bit interesting because David handpicks these casks, and sherry casks have a lot more kind of variety on flavor. So what you'll find in the range of these whiskeys is in bottlings of this whiskey, slight color changes. So if you're buying a lot of these, some may be darker, some might be lighter. And I think it's wonderful to compare each one, but the one that we have today is a little bit lighter, so it's a little bit more fruit forward for me.
I've always loved this whiskey for that very reason. You can buy it every time you go into the shop and have a different barrel, and it's always incredible, and it's always a special experience, but it's never the same experience. And it's something that so many distilleries are so concerned always, especially the core ranges, and it's a lot of work for you guys in the end to keep them consistent over the years. And one that in the best way is not necessarily, although it's consistently excellent. I will say one of the best things visiting the distillery is, I don't know how you get on the VIP tour, pay the extra for the cask thing. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk. This at full strength, the out of the barrel is one of the, I still have a little teeny nip that I smuggled home somehow. And I covet that whiskey. But anyhow.
Yeah, and I also think that this whiskey is quite one of the first ones that kind of give us an indication to what Balvenie is older. So when we look at the Balvenie range of having, 50s, 40s, 30s, soon to be a new 25 out, that we have that sherried element in all of our older whiskeys. And it's a whiskey that I've got two of my two great Balvenie stories about, because before I started working as a brand ambassador, I was on the bar of the launch event for this whiskey. So before I poured it for 170 guests, of course, I was round the back having a little try of it. So before I was even getting paid by Balvenie, I was working on this. But really the best one was I was lucky that one day at the distillery when I was over, David was actually selecting the casks for this. And he walked into the cafe at Glenfiddich, saw me. He said, "Oh, what are you doing today?" And I had internal guests. He said, "Oh, well, we're picking the casks for the single barrel 15. We've got 400 to try, Neil. So if you would like to join us, please." And I met David at Warehouse 10 with the head warehouseman, George. George has got a power drill, a straw on one side. Kelsey McKechnie, who is David's apprentice, and we can get some images of Kelsey up in just a second. We walked around this warehouse with the power drill and the straw and went about nosing them. I had to tap out about 140 casks, I think, because my guests were coming back and I needed to look after them. But it was amazing to see that process. So every time I, see this bottle, I just remember spending a few hours in the warehouse with David nosing casks. So
what a great experience.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. He selects them purely on nose?
Yeah. So I suppose the process was slightly different with me being there because I was wanting to drink a lot more of it. But yeah, first analysis, just like this, have a look at the color. Is the color going to be okay? Next, then it's the nose. And then if it's going to be good, I think if they think it's a really good one, I think they might have a little try when it's one of these warehouse days. But other than that, no, it's all done on the nose.
And that's always done in the warehouse, or they're selecting like maybe a 50 or 100 casks that they think are particularly good or ready, and then bring those back to a lab to further assess, or is it just like, no, this one's good, out the door, let's go?
Well, that's a really good. I would imagine there would be a second analysis down in the kind of tasting lab just to check that it was okay. But yeah, they know what in the warehouse should be of age and where that is, and well, most of the time they should know where that is in the warehousing. Sometimes there can be issues finding casks, and they know that selection is what they can draw from for that year, and they will just go around and see which ones fit the bill or which ones are the best examples for that out of them. So, and one thing with sherry casks, and when I've talked to David before, I asked him, about American oak, and he says that's very stable and it's quite simple. When you're picking those casks, you know what you're going to get. But with a sherry cask, there's so much more play on it, and there can be so much options on the flavor. And it's even just with doing those 120 odd casks or 140 odd casks that I sampled, seeing the play in color and how that Spanish oak or European oak affects the spirit was so much more wilder. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience.
So is all the sherry European oak? Because I know a lot of sherry does use American oak. Is 100% of Balvenie?
Yeah, it's 100% European oak. We get in every year to the distillery around 3,000 sherry butts from Jerez, and they are typically Oloroso that we use on site as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my first kind of education trip with the brand was going to Jerez to meet the gentleman that makes our casks, and Miguel Martinez. Well, he's on the internet with supplying whiskey casks to many people, but he has a real love for us because when he was a young boy, his father sent him to Scotland to learn English, but he got him a job as a tour guide at the distillery. And you've been to Scotland. Is there a more stupid place to learn English? Probably not, really. Our mother tongue in the northeast of Scotland's Doric. Yes. And when you hear Miguel speak English, you've got that classic Spanglish English thing going on, but then it's mixed in with this fantastic Doric tones, and you could be nosing some sherry and be like, what did he just say? So yeah, it was great to see that, and all that work that he does in Jerez for a finishing process on a 12 double wood or 17 double wood is amazing. How much that oak, 2 years in the sun, prepped with Oloroso wine for 2 to 2.5 years before it's getting sent over. And yeah, a great experience just to see those casks in Jerez.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, look at David. He's been there a bit, huh? He's been there for a while.
So David joined us back in 1962. At the time, he was only 17 years old. His first job straight out of school was as a whiskey stocks clerk with William Grant and Sons. So he joined us working in the whiskey stocks team, which is, easily the most exciting department within the entire distilling operations. But he started off kind of working with paperwork, filing invoices, just making cups of tea, coffee. David will describe these were this was the bulk of his job when he first joined. But our master blender at the time was a man called Hamish Robertson, and he noticed that David had a rare skill. He had an exceptional nose, an exceptional palate, and started to take David in and gave him a special kind of training. So David officially became Hamish's apprentice. Spent many years working alongside Hamish until 1974 when Hamish left the business. David was only 29 at the time, so he was actually doing such a great job already. The family brought him on as master blender. And from 1974 to this present day, David has worked on Balvenie, and in fact, almost every single bottle of Balvenie single malt that has been put out there into the world exists and has been put together by David. So just shortly before he became master blender for the company, we released Balvenie as a single malt. So he's gone on to achieve many exceptional things and is industry-wide recognised as being one of the greats. He's received an MBE from the Queen a couple of years ago in 2016. So David has a great story about going to Holyrood Palace and meeting the Queen, where she shook his hand, pinned a medal onto his chest, and made him member of the British Empire for his services to Scotch whisky. The Queen asked him what his job was, and David said to her that he was a whiskey noser. And she said, "A noser?" And he said, "Yeah, I smell whiskey." And she laughed, thinking, "Wow, what a job." Told him she drinks gin, so that was that.
That's awesome.
But one of his proudest moments, for sure.
And
Wow. Well, incredible. Is he exclusively focused on the Balvenie, or are there other?
Yeah. So now David worked on all of our whiskies. So Grant's, Glenfiddich, up until 2010. And in 2010, he handed over to his apprentice, Brian Kinsman. Now, Brian Kinsman is master blender for William Grant and Sons. Mm-hmm. And David is sort of semi-retired, but he still works, focuses on Balvenie now.
Is he from the area? Is that why he started? Yeah, he's
from Ayr.
Ayr. Okay, so not really the area.
Or just not too far.
Oh, it's not? No. Okay. Well.
Not too far. I would say it was the other side of the country, but seeing as Scotland's wee, it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's it.
Have you been to Ayr? It's really
Ayr David is a very passionate Ayr United football fan. So if you ever meet David in person, like his second passion after Balvenie is Ayr United.
Okay, great. That's great news. Cool.
Well, we should probably have a bit of a chat about Tun.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the time, and as soon as that goes over 1 hour, it's no use for IGTV. So we've got 12 minutes to wrap this one up, guys. Yeah, and I think something that the next whiskey we're going on to is the Balvenie Tun 1509 batch 7. So David, you're one of the first people in California to try this. My bottle I had to
in the whole of the States, right?
Oh.
Yeah. And one of the ways that David makes whiskey is he told the family that the right way of making whiskey was in between emptying the casks and filling for bottlings, that all the liquid inside the casks must be rested in marrying tuns to allow oxygen to help the individual casks flavors blend in together. Now, so if you go and visit the distillery and you go into some of the warehouses, you see these large casks, these tons, and the marrying tuns that David uses for, all bottlings that we put in, all whiskey bottlings that we have, each individual cask gets married in these 2,000 liter tons. And it's not the easiest way of making whiskey. It's not the most cost-effective way, but in David's eyes, it's the right way. And as we as that ton progresses, and that story of the ton progresses, we also have to look at the Balvenie stock model and what's in our warehouses. And one of the wonders of what single malt Scotch is that these individual casks and the maturation and that wonderful alchemy of spirit oak maturation and alchemy that happens is never the same. And sometimes casks, although they could taste wonderful, are not quite Balvenie. And we would never want to bottle them as such. So we have a load of miscellaneous casks that maybe don't fit into our age statements or what we want to be bottling, but have got some beautiful flavors to them. So David decided that utilizing these miscellaneous casks, marrying them together, using the skills that he learned from blending when he first started, could make something really special. So that series of the Balvenie ton starts with 1401, which was one of the smaller tons that we use as standard at the distillery. But as that whiskey was so popular, and we basically couldn't keep our fans we just couldn't keep enough liquid for it, we decided to build a custom-made ton, a vessel that was 8,000 liters in this time around, so 6,000 liters more than the standard ones. And David selects casks to fill that don't fit into these standard ranges. And the ton for me is one of the finest ways for a consumer to enjoy aged Balvenie. That this David marries casks that might have 20 years of play into them, could be ranging from close to 20 years up to 40 years of the liquid that goes into the mixture of these tons. And you just get a hugely complex, interesting whiskey. And what's interesting, I think, with Gemma and I looking, at the Balvenie fan groups all the time, you always have that question, which is the best ton, or what is your favorite ton? And it's a real talking point, and I definitely have my favorites, but I'm different to...
What, are you like a 1401 number 3 guy or something?
You actually called it out exactly the one I like. And I used to argue a lot in Singapore office with the travel retail team, which one of the 1401s was the best. And I always stuck with 3. They're like, no, it's 4. And hey, it's personal preference. And what I find...
It's good to be right. 3 is awesome. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, David, if you need me to stick up for you on any discussions with that one, it's not a problem.
I don't have any trouble sticking with my opinion. I liked 6 a lot. I remember, I don't know, it's been so long since I got to taste them. For a long time, there was a bar very close to the store that had 1401. And they had no idea what the hell they had. And it was a beer bar, so nobody touched this stuff. It was in the top left corner. And every time
I heard about this from David Laird.
No kidding. No. Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, there's a bar in Hollywood. It is now. I drank most of that bottle, but I think they were selling the 1401 number 3. It was 3 or 6. I can't remember exactly. This was 2-3 years ago, for like $25 a shot. I mean, it was not cheap, but I mean, way cheaper. Like, as if they had bought it. I mean, they did buy it because those were very affordable back in the day before the auction market went nuts on that stuff. Can you tell us a little about this year's ton? What you said 20 to 40. How many barrels, is it what?
This specific one, batch 7, is actually 21 casks in total.
Wow.
So it's bottled at, I've got it written down here, percentage again, 52.4% is the bottling strength for this one. I forget like all the strengths for each batch because over the years, but obviously everyone is kind of cask strength. This one coming out at 52.4. And then you've got 3 different types of barrel that go into this. So there's 10 refill sherry butts, 4 refill American oak barrels, and then finally 7 sherry hogsheads. But the interesting thing is those refill sherry butts are ex-double wood. So they've been used first of all as a double wood finish, and then we've filled them with Balvenie new make. They've gone through their cycle, and then we've put them. David selected them to put into the ton. They're still, I mean, those sherry butts have a big hit. They've only been used for around 9 months as a finish for double wood previous to that. So a little bit of that kind of tannin and astringency taken out from the barrel, but still so much flavor within that wood, within that oak to give to this whiskey. So you should notice there is a significant influence from the Spanish oak with this one.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Thank you for sharing it. And am I right? We're going to get to sort of sneak into the warehouse today?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Let's do that now. We're going to go to Charlie, who's one of our distillery ambassadors. He's going to take us through the warehouse a little bit and introduce us to Warehouse 24 and then show us the ton. So we
amazing.
Take a look at it. Let's go over to Charlie.
I lost it.
Yeah, we.
That's better. So now we're away from the noises of the distillery. Welcome to Warehouse 24, and hello to all of our whiskey friends in Los Angeles. So we're going to take you through what we've got sitting here maturing in Warehouse 24, and then we're going to have a talk about Ton 1509, which is actually located in this building. So a little bit of a walk through the warehouse, because we do have some fantastic whiskies sitting in here. So we've got some very old whiskey in here from the 60s, so 1967, Balvenie sitting there. There's some rather old whiskey sitting here, 1965, so this is coming in at 55 years of age presently. So these are possibly whiskies that we're going to offer down the line as maybe single cask bottlings of Balvenie, or as small marriages. So maybe a 2-cask marriage of Balvenie, or something like that. You know, it's not up to me. It's up to the main man, David Stewart, to decide what happens with these old whiskies. But now to Ton 1509. So here it is. Here's the marrying vessel itself. So as you can see, Ton 1509 is a reasonably big marrying tun. It's coming in at 7,000 litres. So obviously, legally speaking, the largest cask we can use for maturing whiskey in Scotland is 700 litres. We're adding another 0 on for this, so 7,000. So when we talk about marrying whiskey, this is picking multiple casks, putting them into the tun, and letting them actually bind together over an extended period of time. And David feels, and the family feel, that this is worth doing. You know, there's a lot to be said for letting particularly older whiskies sit and bind together before they're actually bottled. So in 1509's case, we're letting these whiskies sit for usually at least 6 months before bottling them. And I think tonight you're going to be having a look at batch 7, which is the latest addition from Ton 1509. And we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the whiskey later. I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good batch, quite different to the batches that had come before actually. Reminded me personally most of batch 3. It had quite a lot of similarities to batch 3, but all of this is up for debate. Chat soon.
That was awesome.
There you go,
It's
that
so-
batch 3.
Oh, everybody loves that batch 3. Well, this was so cool, guys. I really appreciate it. The whiskey is out of control. It will be here soon. And I'm honored to have, I still have a nice little sample. I'm going to savor that. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we sign off here?
I just want to say thanks so much. It's great to connect with you over in the States. Thanks, David, for inviting us on to chat about Ton.
Oh, thank you for organizing all this. I know it was a lot, and it's very early, and I'm sure you have a long day ahead of equally wonderful chats, I imagine. And hopefully next time we can actually have a glass in the warehouse together. Neil,
I look forward to that.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that as well.
Awesome, guys. Thanks again.
All right, team. Thanks so much.
Really
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.